Econ kids, this is module 21, the fiscal policy and the multiplier module. This one brings in the multiplier into effect. So remember, when we end up in a recession or something along those lines, we can spend some money as the government, and that can push aggregate demand to the right. But because we know the multiplier works, the spending multiplier is listed there at C, right? And government spending happens the same way. So 1 over 1 minus the marginal propensity to consume is my spending multiplier. If the government wants to spend to get out of a recessionary gap, okay, the current output is $500 billion below potential. So if you think about what that means I'm facing some sort of a economic problem, right? Where I have aggregate supply here, aggregate demand there. My long run is here, and I got price level, GDP, and I'm dealing with something that looks like this. AD2 has happened, right? This shift. And I can calculate out that the difference between Y here and YF, if I know this distance is $500 billion, okay? So that distance right there is $500 billion gap, okay? The whole point of looking at that, right, and seeing that this distance here being $500 billion, I don't have to spend $500 billion to fix it. That's the key with the multiplier, okay? If you look at the math going on over here, right? If the marginal propensity to consume is 0.9, so that means in America, I'm going to spend 90 cents of every dollar I earn, and I'm going to take the other 10 cents and save it. That's not a bad assumption for America. We typically spend most of the money that we take in. But that means I have a multiplier of 10 that's going to happen, right? So as soon as I pump some new money into the system, the multiplier is going to affect it 10 times. So an increase of $50 billion in government spending, all right? That $50 billion is going to get multiplied out by 10 to result in the $500 billion gap I need fixed. So the nice part about looking at this in terms of fiscal policy is if we can identify how big the gap is, and we know people are going to spend about 90% of their money, then we also know that we don't have to spend quite as much to fill that gap. All right? Now, remember, we can do two things. We can choose to, in this case, like government spend, right? That's one thing. Or we can choose to do something like cut taxes, right? Because cutting taxes, or we can increase transfers too. That also would work, right? Or increase transfers also works, okay? So the government can do basically those things. The problem is if I decide to do something to taxes and transfers, it's going to be less of a multiplier, all right? Why is it less of a multiplier to get that to happen? The problem is if I cut your taxes, I don't get the full multiplied effect, all right? Because you're already like saving some of that money, okay? So if you look over here to the left, it says, suppose the government decides to increase like transfer payments, okay, something like that, or you want to decrease taxes, that would work too. But if we're going to do that by $500 here, and the marginal propensity to consume is 0.8, I have to take the marginal propensity to consume over 1 minus the marginal propensity to consume. Because I can't take that full $1 anymore, because you basically already have those dollars. So you're already going to save some of them. So I can only take how much of those dollars you're going to spend. So because of that, I'm going to get 0.8 in this case over 0.2, which is, the marginal propensity to 1 minus the marginal propensity to consume, which was 0.8. So 1 minus 0.8. And when I get that $500 increase results in $2,000 of additional GDP. Okay? So because you're taking less of a number, it's just going to result in less. You're going to have to do more. So let's put it that way. So if you government spend, you're getting the full deal because the government doesn't care. They just have the money, they're going to spend it. But if I decide to cut your taxes, you're already receiving that money. So you've already saved some of that money. So you can only spend the amount that you already haven't saved. So the number is just going to be less. I can only take the amount you're going to consume and then multiply that. I can't take the full amount. The government isn't consuming anything. Therefore, that's just a full dollar. All right? So when you think about it that way, the taxes and transfers is just a little less effective. You can do it, but you might have to do it to a greater degree versus just messing with the government spending. So relying on taxes is an interesting thing too, because we have a progressive tax system. We talked about that before in micro, and basically it becomes almost an automatic stabilizer in the economy. As consumers find jobs where your income goes up, you pay more in taxes. And because you're paying in more in taxes, your income doesn't go up so much, right? Your disposable income actually falls a little bit, and then it kind of cools that economy down as you go up because the taxes are doing that. The taxes are taking some of it, so we don't have to worry about crazy inflation. That is non-discretionary fiscal policy. It's basically saying the more you get paid, we're going to start limiting how much that AD pushes to the right on goods and you being able to purchase goods because we're going to take some more of that money in taxes. Discretionary fiscal policy is when, like, hey, we're doing this to you. We're going to, as Congress people, make a law that says this is what's happened, right? But when we tie something non-discretionary, it's usually like some sort of automatic stabilizing thing, like progressive tax system would be a good example. Last but not least, there are some people who like this idea of a balanced budget multiplier. When you think about a balanced budget multiplier, what you're basically saying is for every dollar the government increases spending, they have to take an extra dollar in taxes. Okay? When that happens, a weird thing occurs. If you look at this one over here, how much would a $100 million increase in spending and taxes increase the economy if your marginal propensity to consume was 0.8? Well, when we do that, if the government is spending $100 million, right? But then we're also taxing to get the $100 million. The spending multiplier is 5 because I'm spending all of it as the government. But the tax multiplier is a -4 because I can only use what people have, right? And they don't have as much because it's coming back in taxes, right? For how much I can consume. So spending is going to increase $500 million. But the taxes will decrease GDP by $400 million. Meaning there's a total change in GDP of $100 million. So if you decide to do the budget balance multiplier formula where you're going to say, hey, for every dollar I increase, I have to get $1 in taxes, right? If that's what happens, you are actually going to get the total GDP to change of like 1 is all you're going to get because of the way the multiplier works. So our $100 million really increased GDP $100 million. I didn't get a bonus of GDP. I didn't get anything extra in GDP. I just got a multiplier of 1 because the multiplier multiplied it out, but the taxes took it away and you end up getting exactly what you put in. So if you do decide to try to take in taxes for every dollar you spend, that's fine. Just know that whatever you spend, then you're not going to get any bonus multiplier out of it like you would in this case, where we had the 500 billion times the 10 to get $500 billion. All right, that's the last part of section 4. So till next time.